A Year in Venice, Sophia's Writer's Retreat. The morning I decided to leave Edinburgh, the city was wrapped in its familiar grey embrace, with raindrops pattering against my flat's windows, like tiny fingers tapping out Morse code messages I had never learnt to decipher. I remember sitting at my cluttered desk, surrounded by towers of unfinished manuscripts and cold cups of tea, when the email arrived. The subject line read simply, Venice Writers Retreat, 1 year program. The gentle chime of my laptop notification seemed to echo with possibility, cutting through the persistent whoosh of wind that always seemed to find its way through the old window frames of my Marchmont tenement. My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked open the message, the soft click of my mouse barely audible above the steady drum of rain on the roof above. The words seemed to shimmer on the screen. 12 months in Venice, a converted palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal, a community of writers from across Europe, and most importantly, time. Endless, precious time to write without the constant hum of city traffic, the buzz of mobile phones, or the clatter of everyday life that had become the soundtrack to my creative struggles. The decision felt both terrifying and inevitable, like standing at the edge of a diving board, feeling the rough texture of the non-slip surface beneath my bare feet, whilst hearing the gentle lap of water below. Edinburgh had been my home for 26 years, its cobbled streets worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, its closes and winds holding secrets, whispered by the Scottish wind that always carried the faint scent of brewing hops and coal smoke. Yet something about that email, perhaps the way it described the gentle splash of water against ancient stones, or the promise of mornings filled with nothing but the scratch of pen on paper, made my heart flutter like the pages of a book caught in a sudden breeze. The weeks that followed were a symphony of preparation. The rustle of packing paper as I wrapped my few precious books, the satisfying zip of suitcases closing, the hollow echo of my voice as I called the landlord to give notice. Each sound felt like a note in a melody I was composing without quite knowing the tune. My mother's voice, warm and slightly worried, crackled through the phone line as I explained my plans, her gentle tut-tutting, mixing with the familiar whistle of her kettle in the background. The soft shuffle of my father's slippers across their kitchen floor provided percussion to our conversation, and I could almost smell the comforting aroma of his morning porridge drifting through the connection. Friends gathered for farewell drinks at our usual pub, their voices creating a comfortable babble that mixed with the clink of glasses and the gentle fizz of beer being poured. The wooden floors creaked under our feet as we moved between conversations, and the familiar smell of old wood and spilled ale felt like a hug I was reluctant to leave behind. Sarah's laugh, bright and musical as always, rang out above the gentle hum of conversation, whilst Tom's reassuring pat on my shoulder felt solid and grounding, like the worn stone steps of the Royal Mile. The morning of my departure arrived with unusual sunshine, as if Edinburgh wanted to send me off with a smile rather than its customary drizzle. The taxi's engine purred quietly outside my building, its rhythmic idle mixing with the distant cry of seagulls circling above the meadows. My footsteps echoed in the empty stairwell for the last time, each step accompanied by the gentle creak of old wood that had become as familiar as my own breathing. The slam of the taxi door felt final, decisive, like the satisfying thunk of a book closing at the end of a particularly good chapter. The flight to Venice passed in a blur of gentle airplane hum, the occasional ding of the seatbelt sign, and the soft rustle of passengers settling into their seats. I pressed my face to the small window, watching Scotland disappear beneath a patchwork of green fields and grey clouds. The landscape growing smaller until it looked like a watercolour painting left out in the rain. The stewardess's voice, warm and professional, drifted through the cabin as she announced our descent, and my stomach fluttered with a mixture of altitude change and pure excitement. Venice appeared below, like something from a dream, its waterways glinting like silver threads woven through ancient fabric. The plane's engines changed pitch as we descended, their roar softening to a gentle whine, and I could see tiny boats creating delicate white wakes in the lagoon, looking like brushstrokes on an azure canvas. The bump of landing felt gentle, welcomed, as if the city itself was embracing my arrival with open arms. The Vaporetto from the airport was my first real taste of Venetian life, its diesel engine puttering steadily as we glided through the lagoon. The gentle slap of water against the boat's hull created a rhythm that seemed to slow my heartbeat, whilst the salty breeze carried scents I had never experienced. Brine mixed with the faint sweetness of Mediterranean flowers, and something indefinably ancient, as if the very air held memories of centuries past. Other passengers chattered quietly in languages I couldn't identify, their voices creating a polyglot symphony that felt mysteriously welcoming. As we approached the city proper, the sound of the Vaporetto's engine echoed off the canal walls, creating an acoustic embrace that seemed to welcome me home to a place I had never been. The gentle bump of the boat against the dock, cushioned by old tires that squeaked softly with each contact, felt like a handshake with history itself. My footsteps clicked on the wet stone steps as I disembarked, each sound sharp and clear in the humid air, whilst the gentle lap of water below provided constant, soothing accompaniment. The writer's retreat occupied a 16th century palazzo just off the Grand Canal, its entrance marked by a heavy wooden door. The creaking sound echoed in the stone-floored entrance hall, where my footsteps suddenly seemed small and respectful, as if the building itself commanded a certain reverence. The coordinator, Lucia, greeted me with a voice like warm honey, her English accented with melodious Italian inflections that made even practical instructions sound like poetry. Her heels clicked purposefully on the marble floors as she led me through corridors lined with tall windows that filtered the afternoon light into golden patterns on the walls. My room was on the third floor, accessed by stairs that creaked musically under our feet, each step playing a slightly different note in what felt like a wooden xylophone. The soft whisper of Lucia's silk scarf as she gestured towards my door mixed with the distant sound of water traffic on the canal below, creating an atmosphere of elegant tranquility. The key turned in the lock with a satisfying click that seemed to seal my commitment to this new adventure. The room itself was a revelation. Tall windows opened onto a small balcony overlooking a quiet canal, with a gentle plash of gondolier oars and the soft murmur of tourists drifted up like a lullaby. The bed was covered in crisp white linen that rustled softly when I sat down, testing its comfort, whilst the writing desk positioned near the window seemed to hum with potential. The scratch of my pen as I wrote my first journal entry in Venice was accompanied by the distant ring of church bells, their bronze voices calling across the city in a centuries-old conversation that felt both foreign and oddly familiar. Dinner, that first evening, was served in the palazzos dining room, where crystal glasses chimed softly as they were filled with local wine, and the gentle scrape of cutlery on porcelain mixed with the quiet conversations of my fellow writers. There were 8 of us in total. A playwright from Norway, whose laugh reminded me of wind chimes, a novelist from Germany, who had the habit of drumming her fingers thoughtfully on the table, creating tiny rhythms that somehow never seemed annoying, and a poet from Ireland whose voice carried the musical lilt of his homeland in every syllable. The food was a revelation of texture and flavour. Fresh seafood risotto arrived steaming at the table, accompanied by crusty bread that filled the room with its warm, yeasty aroma. Wine was poured generously, the rich burgundy liquid catching the candlelight as it filled our glasses. Lucia explained the retreat's schedule whilst we ate, her melodious voice weaving through our quiet conversations as people settled into the comfortable rhythm of communal dining. My first morning in Venice began before dawn, awakened not by an alarm but by the natural stirring of the ancient city. Early delivery boats moved quietly through the canals, while shutters opened across the neighbourhood, releasing the first hints of domestic life into the misty air. Church bells began their morning dialogue, each tower contributing to the timeless bronze conversation that had marked Venetian mornings for centuries. I lay in bed, absorbing this different rhythm, my body gradually adjusting to a place where time moved more gently, measured not by digital schedules, but by tides and enduring traditions. The wooden floors of my room creaked softly as I padded to the window, the sound somehow more musical than the tired groans of my Edinburgh flat. Below, the canal was already alive with activity. The gentle purr of water taxis, the rhythmic splash of early morning joggers' feet on stone bridges, and the melodic calls of vendors setting up their stalls in nearby squares. The air carried scents that were becoming familiar. Salt water mixed with the yeasty aroma of fresh bread from bakeries that had been kneading dough in the same locations for generations. The retreat's library became my sanctuary within the first week. Located on the piano nobile, it was a room that seemed to breathe with the weight of accumulated knowledge. The soft whisper of pages turning mixed with the gentle creak of leather armchairs as writers settled in for long sessions of reading and research. Tall windows allowed shafts of golden morning light to dust the ancient books, whilst the faint scratch of pencils on paper provided a constant, comfortable soundtrack to intellectual endeavour. The smell of old leather bindings and aged paper created an atmosphere that felt conducive to creativity, as if the very air was infused with the dreams and aspirations of writers past. My writing routine began to establish itself naturally, guided by the rhythm of the city rather than imposed by digital alarms or artificial schedules. I would wake with the church bells, their bronze voices seeming to call directly to something deep in my chest and begin writing, whilst the morning light was still soft and forgiving. The scratch of my fountain pen on cream paper became as comforting as breathing, whilst the gentle background sounds of Venice provided an ever-changing but never intrusive soundtrack. The distant hum of vaporetti, the occasional laugh of tourists discovering hidden squares, the soft splash of canal water against ancient foundations. The palazzo's breakfast room filled gradually each morning, conversations starting quietly and building to a comfortable murmur as caffeine worked its magic and creative minds began to engage. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled like a contented cat, whilst the gentle clink of cups and saucers provided percussion to discussions about plot developments, character motivations, and the eternal struggle to capture fleeting thoughts on paper. Fresh cornetti arrived each morning, with their buttery aroma mixing with strong coffee to create a sensory combination that spoke of leisurely mornings and unlimited possibilities. The other writers became not just colleagues but friends, our conversations flowing as naturally as the canals outside our windows. Hans, the German novelist, had a habit of humming softly whilst thinking, his melodies mixing with the scratch of his pencil to create a personalized soundtrack for creativity. Ingrid, the Norwegian playwright, typed with a rhythm that sounded almost like distant rain, her fingers finding patterns on the keys that seemed to echo the cadences of her homeland's speech. Seamus, the Irish poet, would often read his work aloud in the evening, his voice turning our communal sitting room into an intimate theatre where words took on physical weight and substance. Venice revealed itself to me gradually, like a complex character in a novel whose motivations only become clear through patient observation. Each morning walk became a chapter in my understanding of the city's personality. My footsteps on stone bridges created tiny echoes that seemed to wake the buildings around me, whilst the gentle slap of water against foundations provided a constant, soothing rhythm that gradually synchronized with my own heartbeat. The maze of narrow streets and sudden openings into sun-drenched squares became familiar, each turn accompanied by its own acoustic signature. The hollow echo of footsteps in covered walkways, the sudden expansion of sound in open fields, the intimate whisper of voices in narrow calle. The market at Rialto became a weekly pilgrimage, its sounds and smells creating a sensory feast that inspired descriptions I struggled to capture on paper. The musical calls of vendors mixed with the gentle splash of delivery boats unloading fresh seafood, whilst tourists exclaimed in half a dozen languages over displays of vegetables that seemed to glow with Mediterranean sunshine. The rustle of paper bags, the soft thud of ripe tomatoes being selected, and the clink of coins changing hands created a commercial symphony that felt both ancient and eternal. The smell of fresh fish mixed with basil and lemons created an aroma so complex and appealing that I found myself inventing characters whose entire motivation was the pursuit of the perfect meal. My writing began to change, influenced by the rhythms and textures of my new environment. Where once my prose had been shaped by the sharp edges and rapid pace of Edinburgh life, it now began to flow with the gentler currents of Venetian existence. Sentences grew longer, more luxurious, like the afternoon light that streamed through my tall windows and painted golden rectangles on the marble floors. The constant presence of water seemed to seep into my language, making everything more fluid, more forgiving, more willing to meander towards its destination rather than rushing to arrive. The retreat's evening gatherings became the highlight of each day. We would assemble in the main salon as the sun began to set, the windows gradually darkening whilst candles were lit with the soft scratch of matches and the gentle flicker of flame taking hold. Someone would read from their work in progress, their voice mixing with the soft crackle of candlelight and the distant sound of evening traffic on the Grand Canal. The gentle clink of wine glasses provided punctuation to our discussions, whilst the soft rustle of turning pages marked the progress of shared stories and mutual encouragement. Lucia would often join us, her presence adding a layer of Italian warmth to our international gathering. Her laugh was like the ring of small bells, whilst her comments on our work were delivered with such gentle enthusiasm that even the most constructive criticism felt like encouragement. She had a habit of humming softly whilst she listened, her melodies weaving through our conversations like a musical thread that bound us together as a creative community. The soft whisper of her silk scarves and the gentle click of her heels on marble floors became sounds I associated with wisdom, encouragement, and the kind of nurturing that allows creativity to flourish. As autumn deepened into winter, Venice revealed new aspects of her character. The tourist crowds thinned, leaving more space for locals and the comfortable sounds of daily life. Shopkeepers chatting across narrow streets, children playing in hidden courtyards, the soft shuffle of elderly residents making their daily rounds to familiar shops and cafes. The light changed too, becoming softer, more golden, filtering through increasingly frequent mists that rose from the lagoon like the breath of some sleeping giant. The palazzo's heating system awakened with the cooler weather, old radiators beginning to tick and gurgle like contented animals settling in for the winter. The sound became part of the building's personality, a gentle percussion that accompanied my writing sessions and seemed to encourage longer periods of creative focus. The scent of wood smoke began to drift through the city as fireplaces were lit in ancient buildings, mixing with the ever-present salt air to create an aroma that spoke of comfort, tradition, and the endless cycle of seasons. My relationship with the city deepened as the months passed. What had once seemed like a maze became familiar territory, each bridge and turning known, not just by sight, but by sound. The particular echo of footsteps in certain covered walkways, the way voices carried differently in various squares, the acoustic signature of different areas that helped me navigate, even in the thickening winter fogs. I began to recognize individual gondoliers by the rhythm of their oars and the timbre of their calls, whilst certain shop owners' voices became as familiar as old friends' greetings. The high water season brought its own unique experiences. The gentle lap of rising water against doorsteps created an intimate sound that seemed to bring the lagoon into the heart of the city. The splash of boots on temporarily flooded squares mixed with the cheerful chatter of residents who treated these regular inundations as part of Venice's charming personality, rather than inconveniences to be endured. The soft scrape of wooden walkways being positioned provided temporary percussion to the city's symphony, whilst the gentle slosh of water, finding new territories to explore, created an ever-changing acoustic landscape. Writing during these flooded periods felt particularly magical. Sitting in my third-floor room, hearing the gentle whisper of water in the streets below, whilst church bells continued their eternal conversations above, I felt suspended between elements in a way that seemed to liberate my imagination. Characters began to appear on my pages who were more fluid, more adaptable, more willing to embrace uncertainty and change. Plots began to meander like waterways, finding unexpected connections and surprising destinations. Christmas in Venice was a revelation of gentle celebration and profound peace. The tourist hordes were replaced by locals moving through familiar routines, their voices carrying the comfortable cadences of people who belonged to their surroundings rather than merely visiting them. Shop bells tinkled more frequently as residents purchased gifts and seasonal foods, whilst the aroma of holiday baking drifted from hidden bakeries and family kitchens. Church bells took on a more festive rhythm, their bronze voices seeming to carry messages of joy and renewal across the winter sky. The palazzos celebration was intimate and international, each of us sharing traditions from our home countries, whilst gradually creating new ones together. The soft crackle of a fire in the salon's ancient fireplace, mixed with quiet conversations in multiple languages, whilst the gentle clink of glasses marked toasts to creativity, friendship, and the gift of time to pursue our craft. Spring's arrival was announced not by dramatic changes, but by subtle shifts in the city's daily rhythms. The morning light began to strengthen earlier, filtering through my windows with increasing warmth and persistence. The sounds of the canals changed too, as increased boat traffic brought new rhythms and energy to the waterways. Birds began to add their voices to the urban symphony, their calls mixing with church bells and human voices to create a more complex, but somehow more optimistic soundtrack to daily life. The Palazzo's garden, hidden behind high walls, but accessible through French doors from the library, began to reveal its spring personality. The gentle rustle of new leaves mixed with the soft buzz of awakening insects, whilst the splash of a small fountain provided constant, peaceful accompaniment to outdoor writing sessions. The scent of blooming flowers began to compete with salt air, creating complex aromas that seemed to inspire more sensual, more emotionally rich descriptions in my work. My fellow writers began to prepare for departures, some staying only for shorter residencies, whilst others, like me, had committed to the full year. The Palazzo's rhythms adjusted to these comings and goings, with farewell dinners marked by the gentle clink of glasses raised in appreciation and the soft rustle of contact information being exchanged. New voices joined our evening gatherings, bringing fresh perspectives and different creative energies, whilst the core group of longer-term residents provided continuity and institutional memory. As summer approached, the city's personality shifted once again. Tourist voices began to join the local conversations, creating a more international, but also more energetic atmosphere. The sounds of canal traffic increased, with more frequent vaporetto announcements echoing off ancient walls, and the gentle splash of increased boat activity providing busier accompaniment to daily routines. The light grew stronger and more insistent, streaming through tall windows with such intensity that afternoon writing sessions required strategic positioning to avoid glare while still benefiting from the inspiring view of constantly changing canal life. The heat brought new scents. The intensified aroma of canal water mixed with the fragrance of flowers blooming in hidden gardens and on private terraces. Gelateria cues provided new acoustic entertainment, with the musical chatter of visitors from around the world mixing with the satisfied sighs of people enjoying perfectly crafted frozen treats. Restaurant terraces filled with the gentle clink of cutlery and the comfortable murmur of conversation, whilst the soft splash of canal water provided constant, cooling, psychological relief from the rising temperatures. My writing evolved throughout these seasonal changes, each shift in weather and light, bringing new insights and creative possibilities. The discipline of daily practice, supported by the retreat's gentle structure and the inspiring environment of Venice itself, had transformed not just my work, but my entire approach to creativity. Where once I had struggled against distractions and fought for time, I now found myself part of a rhythm that felt natural, sustainable, and deeply satisfying. The Palazzo's library had become not just a workspace, but a spiritual home, its tall windows framing views that changed constantly, but somehow remained eternally beautiful. The morning light that painted golden rectangles on ancient floors became as important to my creative process as coffee or comfortable seating. The gentle scratch of a fountain pen on quality paper had become as natural as breathing, whilst the distant sounds of Venice provided an ever-changing but never intrusive backdrop to creative concentration. As my year-long residency approached its conclusion, I found myself changed in ways I had not anticipated. The rhythm of Venetian life had seeped into my bones, teaching me patience, appreciation for beauty, and respect for tradition, whilst also encouraging innovation and creative risk-taking. The constant presence of water had made my thinking more fluid, more willing to find unexpected connections and explore surprising territories. The friendships formed during those months felt deep and lasting, bonds created not just through shared interests, but through the unique experience of pursuing creative dreams in one of the world's most inspiring cities. Our evening conversations had evolved from tentative sharing to profound discussions about art, life, and the mysterious process of creating something from nothing. The gentle clink of wine glasses and the soft rustle of manuscript pages had become the soundtrack to relationships that would continue long after we scattered back to our home countries. My final evening in the palazzo was marked by a special dinner, the table set with particular care and ceremony. The soft clink of crystal glasses mixed with gentle laughter and the inevitable sadness of parting, whilst candles flickered in ancient candelabra that had witnessed countless similar farewells. Lucia's voice, warm with emotion, spoke of the retreat's mission to nurture creativity and the joy of watching writers discover new aspects of their craft. The gentle scratch of pens signing books, and the soft rustle of final photographs being taken created the closing notes of my Venetian symphony. Packing felt different from the hurried preparation that had brought me to Venice. Each item carried memories now. The fountain pen that had written thousands of words in Italian light, the notebooks filled with observations and insights, the photographs that captured not just images, but entire emotional experiences. My final morning walk through Venice was a meditation on gratitude and transformation. My footsteps on familiar bridges created echoes that seemed to carry the weight of accumulated experience, whilst the gentle lap of canal water against ancient stones provided a rhythmic farewell that felt both sad and celebratory. The morning light, filtering through the same mist that had greeted me almost a year earlier, painted the city in shades of gold and possibility that seemed to promise that the lessons learned here would continue to influence my work and life for years to come. The vaporetto to the airport carried not just my luggage, but the invisible weight of profound change. The gentle puttering of the engine mixed with my heartbeat, both rhythms now synchronized with memories of countless similar journeys that had become part of Venice's hold on my imagination. The city grew smaller behind me, but rather than feeling lost, I felt expanded, as if the year had added new chambers to my heart and new territories to my creative landscape. Venice had given me more than time to write. It had taught me how to listen to the subtle rhythms that govern both creativity and life itself. The gentle sounds that had provided constant accompaniment to my year there had become part of my internal soundtrack, a collection of audio memories that would continue to inspire and comfort long after I returned to whatever came next. As the plane lifted off, carrying me back towards familiar territories and new adventures, I carried within me the sound of church bells calling across morning mist, the gentle splash of oars cutting through ancient waterways, and the satisfied scratch of pen on paper in golden afternoon light. Venice had changed me, and through me, it would continue to influence every word I would ever write, every story I would ever tell, and every creative challenge I would ever embrace. The year in Venice had ended, but the music it had taught me to hear would play on forever. Sleep well, and a very good night.